I would like to invite people, teachers who are not directly involved in the project, but I would like to invite also students who have also experiences connected with the project-based teaching. Hanna Stachera, together with Maciej Wójcik and Adam Pilipiec, and they will talk about perspective of those people who have impaired vision. What can we say about education under such circumstances? All right, good morning. We came to you from a school for students with special needs. It is a school for children with impaired vision in Laski. We asked our students what was the most difficult for them during remote education. At the same time, I can mention that the project-based method is quite present in our school. We keep working using the project-based method because our students are students of the technical secondary school for software development. This is what they do on everyday basis, but can it be done during the remote learning phase? Well, when you hear to them, when you hear when you listen to them and when you hear what they what they say, answering the questions which we asked them, they will tell you what was most difficult for them. Our school is not really very crowded. The number of respondents is limited, but the responses will show to you what was so difficult during the remote learning phase. And now I would like to give the floor to Adam. Good morning. I think that most of people in this room know what remote education in regular schools was. But have you ever thought what it was like in schools for special educational needs students, for example, with impaired vision? I don't think so. In the center in Laski, there were 32 participants involved in the study. We asked them how they worked and how they perceived remote work. 14 students were from general secondary school, 12 students from technical secondary school, and 12 persons from a vocational education class. The first question of the survey was were the materials you received adapted to your visual abilities, and were they also adapted linguistically in the form of simple language. 13 persons answered yes, 29 partially, and 0 answered no. And it may suggest that the materials were not perfectly adjusted, and students had problems to read them properly or learn what was presented. The second question that was asked during the survey was as follows. Did you learn more, less, the same amount while during the remote education period? More, 1. Less, 2. The same, 39. And that means that in spite of these difficulties with the materials they received from teachers, students were trying to cope with it somehow. Oh, she must have presented it wrongly. Everything seems okay. Well, the way of preparation of the materials influenced the decreased access to knowledge of the students. And the third question which we asked was, have you felt that remote learning was impairing your mood? 3 persons answered no. Surprise, surprise. 17 a lot, and 22% said very much, and it is normal. I don't think that anyone likes sitting in the 4 walls of your room in front of a computer 24 hours a day without any possibility of meeting your friends. Next. Was it difficult for you that you didn't talk with your teacher, with your friends, your peers? No, yes, or I felt it a lot. 4 persons said no, yes 7, and a lot 31. So we can see that students missed contact with each other. In a remote learning setup, they met only online. There are different messaging applications like Messenger, Facebook, whatever, but it doesn't replace an in-person contact with our peers. Next. Did remote learning interrupt your afternoon activities in Laski, for example, orientation, revalidation, music school, or swimming pool, sports trainings, and others? 41% said yes. 1% said no. Unfortunately, it is a huge problem. Because quite many of our students are involved in different athletic activities, but they had a problem to continue their activities. And the last question. Instead of physical education lessons, because you didn't have it, did you do any other sports? How did online education influence your fitness? And the options are, it had a very negative impact, slight impact, and no change. Very negative is 35 answers. 6 said slight impact, and only 1% said that it didn't have any impact whatsoever. It may have been myself. It simply means that students spend much more time in front of computers. Well, it was a lockdown time. You couldn't go out. So we were under lockdown as well. No chance for any physical activity. It must have deteriorated their fitness, and in particular, it applies to athletes whose practice is more intense. And now we will tell you what it is like from our perspective. What was the worst for me was lack of contact with my schoolmates. I couldn't replace these contacts with anything else, so we were cut off from each other. But we also had problems with some learning materials. And it was much more severe at the time of the first lockdown. At that time, I was in my primary school. We didn't have any remote classes. The only thing that happened is that they sent some materials to us, and it was not always adjusted, and it must have influenced the results of our final exams at the end of the primary school. But later on, it really influenced, for example, my understanding of mathematics. And as far as relationships with our schoolmates is concerned, we didn't have any possibility to meet. It's different when you just communicate using different messaging applications. What was most difficult for me was that I was under lockdown and I couldn't really practice sports, although I am a swimmer. And the only thing that I could do is that I had some access to the swimming practices. But most people didn't have that chance. They didn't have that opportunity, and they simply had to stay at home. So that's it from me. I can't really say much about remote work at school for students with impaired vision, because it's only my second year in that school. But we know what it was like in regular schools. Some studied more, others studied less. Different reasons for that. Well, mainly people were so much involved in different computer games that disturbed them to continue their regular education. And remote learning, well, Some tried harder. It was a personal decision. A lot depended on whether the materials were properly adjusted and whether they had really good access to hardware and internet. Thank you very much. I simply would like to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to think how we may prepare. We are showing here that we, as the School for Students with Special Educational Needs, we lose a lot during the remote learning period, and it's really very difficult for us to be ready. Thank you very much indeed. And I think that two subjects were presented here very strongly. The first thing is that the first lockdown was very painful. We were not prepared for it. Although scientists had been saying for years that it's a question of time. In 2007, there was a famous publication in a journal on viruses. And at that time, the cave bats were examined and different coronaviruses were identified. And people knew that it was just a question of time. 5, 10, 15 years, but we knew that it would have happened. But it was not strong enough signal to prepare educational systems, and that is why teachers had to face the situation that simply unfolded before them, that suddenly they became experts in remote education. And now, 3 days down the road, we are much more prepared, much better prepared. But that was the point of the project, to be prepared when such a need arises. Unfortunately, we see that there are such indicators. And unfortunately, we can see that the quality of education went down. And one of the main problems is that at a time when we cut off the relationship between teachers and students, then the whole education responsibility was on you. It was your choice whether you wanted to participate in it or not. And if someone simply concluded that you didn't want to participate in it, well, it's quite understandable because, playing games is great. And then teachers were helpless in a majority of cases. And now, unfortunately, it is on you to make up for the arrears. And we are rooting for you.